So, hello again and welcome to the Real Estate Junkies. I am Nick Zigic, if you forgot since last time. But anyway, today we're going to talk about something really tight, a very narrow niche of real estate. Co-ownership, real estate co-ownership. So it's not like, title and stuff like that, but you and I are walking around the beach and want to buy a house. How do we buy that house and keep it safe? With me in the studio today is Rami Rahmanian, a friend of mine, attorney at law in Arcadia. How you doing, Rami?
Great. Nice to see you again, Nick.
Good to see you too.
In downtown LA, no less.
Downtown LA,
Yeah.
your kitchen?
Right.
Or no, you said a bunch of friends have that kitchen.
And in the garden also.
Yeah, they saw, people saw this picture, so they went and got kitchens just like
Right,
that.
yeah.
A great
It's
kitchen,
very,
I guess.
Very popular motif in this kitchen. Yes.
I love it. So, you and I are walking down, a couple of friends of mine's actually, a true story, went up to Big Bear. And they went up just for the lake, for the day, saw a couple of great properties, and one of them says, I would love to own this place. And the other friend says, I would love to own it too. Why don't we own it together? So
Right.
we're talking about co-ownership and the pitfalls, the pros and cons, and all that stuff. Take it.
Take it away, right? Okay.
Take it away.
Well, it's actually very common. You'll have people that want to buy beachfront property. They can't afford it themselves, so usually they'll find friends or relatives and they'll say, hey, let's go in on this together.
Yep.
It's very common, and it can be a very good situation for everybody involved, as long as you hammer out all of the terms up front.
Yeah. Business deal, huh?
Right. And what I mean is you have to make sure you have a written agreement in place between all the parties to hammer out all the details. These details could include who's going to be in charge of paying the bills. Are we going to rent the place when we're not using it? How much are we going to rent it for? What happens if one of us wants out?
Right. How much is each one going to use it and when?
Exactly.
Okay.
If I'm going to rent it, am I going to pay you rent for it? Is that going to be at a discount? All of these issues need to be put in place up front. And you have to be careful. You really have to be prepared to work very closely with these people. And for a lot of individuals, you might think it's a good idea because you see your friends maybe once or twice a year, and maybe you won't feel that way after you've been, seeing them 3 or 4 times a month to hammer out all your property issues.
Absolutely. I compare that kind of a situation like a prenup in marriage, or any business contract where the contracts are usually put together at the time when there is no argument.
Right.
So they're all contracts are reflecting only situations when there is an argument. Otherwise, people don't even need to open the contract if everything is equal to the day when they're signed.
Right. Right.
Lease agreements and so on. So basically, the contracts need to be in place, defining every single situation, including the exit strategies. Right.
Especially the exit strategies.
Right.
If one party wants out, for example, if I don't want to be a part of this anymore, if I'm tired of it, or if I need the money for something else, how is that going to be handled? Are you going to buy me out? Is there going to be a right of first refusal? Those issues need to be worked out. The other thing is, whenever you're entering into kind of an investment or co-ownership situation, you always want to try to limit your liability as much as possible.
Right. And that is done?
And the way you do that is you might form an entity, such as a corporation or an LLC. Those are limited liability entities, which means the underlying owners or shareholders, their personal assets are shielded from liability related to this property. So the way that would be handled between you and I is we would form an LLC. We would create an operating agreement that would have all of the terms that we spoke about. And once that's formed, we would then purchase the property under the LLC and manage it according to our contract.
So no different than if we were to open a business or buy a business. The business, the LLC, would be a business that would
Right.
be handling our management of the said venture.
Right. That's absolutely
Okay.
true. That's absolutely
That's great.
true.
So any other situations, scenarios, cool stories that you might have found in your practice regarding co-ownership and different types of co-ownership?
Good question. I don't know if you could refer to them as cool stories. In my profession, being an attorney, people come to you when there's a problem
Yeah,
of some
I
kind.
hear you. But cool for the audience.
Cool for the audience. Well, the most common thing that I've seen is where parents put their children on title to their property.
Okay.
You'll have, let's say, in one case, I had 2 clients come in. We had a mom and a son. The mom, was hesitating putting together a trust. She didn't want to spend the money. They left my office, and on their own, she just decided, well, I'm going to put my son on title. I'm going to make him a joint tenant to the property.
Creative ways of dealing with issues.
It's a creative way of doing it, and a lot of people do it. You know, a joint tenancy avoids probate. There's a right of survivorship, which means when one joint tenant passes away, the survivor inherits or absorbs their share of the property. Now, in this case, that's exactly what happened. The mom passed away, so the son ended up with an undivided 100% ownership interest in this property.
Right.
The problem is he had siblings. He had brothers and sisters who were not put on title to this property. So it turned into a huge mess because the brothers and sisters ended up suing the son that owned the property in order to try to get a portion of it.
So ways around it?
Well, there's other issues too that I think
nice
are
to mom before.
that are important to highlight. What a lot of people don't realize is when you put somebody else on title to property as a joint tenant, you're exposing that property to their creditors as well as yours.
Okay, that's a different viewpoint.
Right. So in this case, if the son had filed for bankruptcy or gotten sued or owed a lot of debt, his creditors or the bankruptcy estate would be able to access that property because he was the joint tenant.
Exactly.
The other issue is if the son had been married and he was going through a divorce of some kind, well, his ex-wife might have been able to claim a portion of that property as marital property. So really the crux of this story is you want to try to avoid doing that if at all possible.
Right.
And the way to remedy that is really to have a proper, well thought out estate plan in place. Put together a revocable trust. It might cost you some money in the short term, but it'll end up saving your heirs a lot of money in the long term, and you can accomplish all the same benefits.
Yeah, and for the trust issues and so on, you should look at our show that did, actually with Rami, we did the trust versus probate, and that is a show, look it up. So, well, any other issues regarding, or benefits or flip side of the coins that the viewers might be or should be aware of?
Sure. The key with co-ownership of property in any case is proper planning. You always want to make sure to have everything set out up front. One of the most common problems that I see deal with incapacity.
Okay.
Okay? Incapacity means someone has something bad happen to them. They survive, but they're unable to make decisions for themselves legally. They don't have the mental capacity to do that.
Different thing, okay.
I'll tell you a story. I had a client come in. It was a husband and wife. The husband had some health problems. Even though he had these problems, they kept putting together an estate plan. He ended up going in for routine knee surgery. Unfortunately, something very bad happened and he ended up with some brain damage.
Wow.
And he became incapacitated. Prior to this, they had used most of their funds to purchase property. And in fact, they bought a boat, to be quite honest with you. So his wife was now kind of stuck in a situation where her husband didn't have capacity. They didn't have any kind of power of attorney in place or a trust of any kind. And she needed funds now to pay for his care. Now, the problem with that is they owned most of their property as community property, which means she was having a hard time selling any of the property because she needed his signature too. And he couldn't sign because he lacked capacity.
So what did they do?
In a case like that, where you don't have a power of attorney in place or a trust, really her options are limited. What I advised her is she could try to file for a conservatorship over her husband. Are you familiar with a conservatorship?
No. What?
Basic.
Waiting for you to tell me.
Okay, you're with bated breath.
Okay.
A conservatorship is essentially a guardianship over an adult. You go to court, you file just a mountain of paperwork with the court, and you're asking the court to allow you to make financial decisions on behalf of this disabled individual.
And that's a pretty challenging thing to get through, huh?
Well,
I would assume.
It's not so much challenging
as far as ethical versus, is the person in charge of the conservatorship working in their favor or somebody's or the favor of the person they're representing.
Right. That's what the court inquires, and that's why there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of inquiries that you have to go through. And once you have the conservatorship in place, it's ongoing. You have to continue to go back to court to get permission and to clear things by the judge, such as the selling of property.
Right. So did that work out?
Yeah,
properly?
in their case, she did have a very old power of attorney, and unfortunately didn't name her as his agent. The power of attorney was one of his old army buddies.
Wow.
So he was still alive, thankfully, but we had a situation now where the wife had to go through the army buddy to do anything.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
So is there any other way of dealing with these situations? One time, I believe the conservatorship is for the length, for the
Right.
longer period. or
conservatorship
many-
is indefinite.
Yeah, indefinite, right?
Right.
And if there's just a few decisions to be made at that very time, is there other ways around it?
Absolutely. If in certain cases, if you have a disabled individual and there's just a single transaction you need to go through. I had another client that faced this exact issue. His wife unfortunately had Alzheimer's. She'd been diagnosed, and he needed to be able to sell their property. So what we did was we went to court and we filed a petition asking for authorization for a single transaction.
Okay.
We asked the judge to transfer the property to the husband's name for the sole purpose of being able to sell it. And we were able to get it through. So
Okay.
that'll work in limited circumstances, but again, it depends on the situation.
Well, it's a complex area, obviously, and having the real estate involved in all aspects of our life, it obviously calls in for a different view for different situations. Is there anything else on this co-ownership of property that we could address at this time that would be, niche,
Well,
special? We want special content for our viewers.
for our viewers, well, when it comes to co-ownership, there are many, many different issues that can arise. And again, like I said, there are simple steps you can take in the short term to try to avoid all of these complex problems. One is make sure you properly plan. So if you're buying property with somebody else, make sure that all of those terms are hammered out up front,
Okay.
whether it's buying a building like the one behind us or vacation property. And if you care about your loved ones, take the time to put together some kind of an estate plan, even if it's just a will and a power of attorney. Make sure you plan everything up front, if at all possible.
Right. So to conclude just the whole topic about co-ownership, I would assume that the best thing is to plan an estate plan,
Right.
to write an estate plan that would actually protect everybody, and that would eliminate most of these things that we covered here.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, you heard it here, Real Estate Junkies. My buddy Rami, if you need any questions, don't forget to ask him as well. Rami, thank you so much.
Nick. As
I'll
always,
talk
I
to you
appreciate it.
next time.
Great. Talk to you next time.
You have listened to another or viewed another episode of the Real Estate Junkies. See you later.